Hello, my name's Olurotimi Osha. Today is June the 30th, 2026. Today is the last day of Men's Mental Health Month. So it's going to be my last discussion concerning mental health. Now, I'm going to also try and draw a through line um, between mental health and Nigerians in America, Nigerian Americans. So I've been doing a number of videos in which I've been, discussing the interests of Nigerian Americans. And so this, I'm going to have some kind of nexus between mental health and Nigerian Americans. But also because, we're just a few days, about 4 days away to the 250th anniversary of America. I'm going to also talk about some of our founding fathers and link the person I'm going to be discussing. That's the missing congressman from New Jersey, Thomas Kean Jr., who has just resurfaced after being absent for 142 days, right? He did speak. I watched a speech of his in which he explained why he had been absent. He'd been hospitalized voluntarily. He'd, gone for had a diagnosis of depression, right? And so he said his doctor uh, concluded that he needed a long-term stay in the hospital to be able to treat his depression. So uh, he was gone for 142 days. That's almost 5 months, right? So, uh, you know, so clearly that's what you call clinical depression. That's severe depression, right? By the way, this discussion, I'm not trying to stigmatize mental health, right? I think it is humane to treat people who have uh, mental illness or any form of illness, with humanity. America is a pressure cooker, and we have to understand that just because of the severe pressure of being number one, of being the most competitive nation, uh, we should pay attention to the mental health of Americans instead of, um, you know, disparaging those who are open about their mental health status, or or people who need treatment because of just the pressure, right, that they face living in America. Unfortunately, of course, mental health is weaponized against Black Americans, against minorities. I've been a victim. I've talked about how the state of Maryland, Montgomery County, using uh, a fabulist who conjured himself up as my uncle when he's not, saying that I had been fired at work in the Department of the Navy where I was an auditor and had reported fraud, and therefore he thought I was going through a mental health crisis, and he filed a perjured emergency petition. I've done videos regarding this. All of that was fabricated. Now, I don't have a mental illness. The psychiatrist determined this. My family stated this, but I was dehumanized in the process, right? I had not been accused of a crime or anything. So what should have been a case of me being treated humanely, ostensibly for uh, concerns about my mental health raised by somebody misrepresenting himself as my uncle, um, turned out to be a criminal case, right? So you see the weapon. I've done videos talking about how the state of Maryland and the racist Montgomery County Police and racist and crooked judges like Judge James Bonifant weaponize mental health against Black men, against Black people. This crooked state attorney, John McCarthy, as well. Again, I've done enough videos discussing this, but just to show that I'm not a misanthrope or automaton like a generation that weaponizes mental health against Americans, particularly against minorities. The through line I'm going to be connecting between uh, Congressman Kean, who deserves to be treated with dignity and humanity, uh, is with another Nigerian, a female Nigerian. And just for her privacy, she's a friend of mine. I actually know her. I know her. I'm not going to give details She went to one of the most prestigious universities, once the most expensive university in America, but she was dehumanized, right? And But before I get to her story, uh, I'm going to just elaborate more on Congressman Kean. So Congressman Kean, like I said, admitted that, well, he had been in the hospital for depression, and he talked about the harms of depression. You know that it's not just emotional, but it's also physical, and he had a long-term stay. There was a time in America that if you talked about receiving treatment for a mental illness, um, it was basically the end of your political career. But I don't think that's going to be the case for Congressman Kean. It wouldn't, if his political career is undermined, it wouldn't be because of being treated for mental illness, since data suggests that almost half of Gen Z, right, have received treatment or spoken with a mental health professional, right? So um, I think we're headed towards you know an environment in which there's the destigmatization of mental health. But like I said, unfortunately, it's still weaponized against Black people. Now, Congressman Kean, let me move to lighter stuff. Congressman Kean has a very interesting biography, right? He's the son of a governor. His father was a governor, and his grandfather was a congressman. He himself, he's Ivy League educated. He was a graduate of Dartmouth, right? I like talking about Ivy Leagues, right? Don't I? And he got a master's from Tufts University. But Congressman Kean actually represents, you know, those who like to talk, try and show some kind of elitist ancestry by claiming to be descendants of the Mayflower, people who came from the Mayflower, and those who like to seek some kind of American aristocracy, of being descendants of some kind of American aristocracy. Congressman Kean is actually really a descendant of American aristocracy. He's a direct descendant of William Livingston. Livingston was the first governor of New Jersey, and he was a governor at the time of our independence in 1776 of New Jersey. Like I said, he was the first governor of New Jersey. He's a direct ancestor of Congressman Kean. Now, William Livingston is from the famous Livingston family of people who have studied American history. There's the Hudson Valley Livingston family, right? They had the Livingston Manor in New York. It had been granted by King George the First of England, of Great Britain, which was over 160,000 acres of land. Now, the Livingston family, many families in New York like to marry into the Livingston family. In fact, many did marry into the Livingston family because of their status, right? So the Alexander Hamiltons, right? The Hamiltons, the Schuyler family. We know Alexander Hamilton married into the Schuyler family. The Roosevelts, we've had two presidents. The Roosevelts are Dutch, so the Livingston family married a Dutch side. They have a Dutch side as well. So, old money likes to marry itself, right? So, the Astor family, right? The billionaire Astor family, a part of the Livingston family. The Livingston family has presidents as descendants. George Bush, right? The Bush is George Bush. So the Livingston family is American aristocracy, right? People talk of the Kennedys being an American aristocracy. They're a new aristocracy. The old original founding of America aristocracy was the Livingston family. Everybody in New York wanted to marry into the Livingston family. the Van Rensselaers, so many of those families married into the Livingston family. Now, concerning our founding documents, William Livingston, the direct ancestor of Congressman Kean, was a signer of the Articles of Association, right? So the Articles of Association, that was the article for the First Continental Congress in 1774. I've done a video discussing the Continental Congress. They were there to they're founded to start the protest, to organize the protest and boycott against Great Britain's goods, and to protest the intolerable acts, right? So that was the First Continental Congress. So we had the Articles of Association. So William Livingston signed that document, and also he signed the U.S. Constitution, the Constitution we actually are organized under. So the U.S. Constitution was created the current U.S. Constitution was created in 1787. So you normally hear me referring to it as the Constitution of 1787. It wasn't ratified, by the states until 1788, and it didn't take effect until 1789, when our first president under the current Constitution, George Washington, took the oath. He took the oath on April 30, 1789 in New York. And guess who swore him into office, who administered the oath? It was one Robert R. Livingston, another ancestor. He was the first cousin of William Livingston, the direct ancestor of Congressman Kean, right? That I'm talking about today. Congressman Kean, the congressman, he's a Republican, by the way, who just resurfaced after being missing for 142 days, and he admitted that he was being treated for depression. He had been in the hospital for depression. So he comes from a very American aristocracy, very consequential figures in his ancestry, who their names are all over our founding documents, right? They're in the Articles of Association, they're in the Declaration of Independence. Who signed? So Philip Livingston signed the Declaration of Independence. Philip Livingston was the brother of Robert R. Livingston, who administered the oath of office to George Washington in New York, right? Robert R. Livingston was called the Chancellor. That goes. The Chancellor was then the title given to the highest judicial officer in New York, right? In the New York judiciary, it was basically like being the Chief Justice of New York. So remember, our first capital was actually in New York, right? And so the ancestor of Robert, so you see this guy, Congressman Kean, his preeminent, his august ancestry is all over American history, America's founding, and their founding documents. So sometimes you might be in school, in class with some people. Of course, America likes to tout itself as the land where everybody comes from, rises from grass to grace. Everybody pulls themselves, everyone pulls himself up by the bootstraps. Even though most don't have boots, but not the family of Congressman Kean. Congressman Kean's ancestry, they were aristocrats, right? They were the Hudson Valley aristocrats, right? That every aspiring or every prominent family in New York wanted to marry into, and they include the Roosevelts, as I said, the Astor family, and so on and so forth. So they're all of our founding documents. The Articles of Association, that's the Livingston family, right, which Congressman Kean comes from. And the Articles of Association, the Articles of the Declaration of Independence, the U.S. Constitution, all of our founding documents. So Philip Livingston was a brother of Robert R. Livingston, who administered the oath. Now, Robert R. Livingston is significant as well because he was one of the drafters of the Declaration of Independence. Yes, I've done a video saying that Thomas Jefferson was the author of the Declaration of Independence, but he was a member of a committee of 5 that drafted the independence, right? they made contributions, suggestions, and they edited the work of Thomas Jefferson. That included Benjamin Franklin, Robert Roger Sherman, John Adams, Thomas Jefferson, and Robert R. Livingston. So Robert R. Livingston, again, the an ancestor of Congressman Kean. So Robert R. Livingston was one of the drafters. But he didn't sign the Declaration of Independence, even though he was one of the drafters. He was a member of the Committee of Five, but he delegated his brother Philip Livingston to sign it. So his brother's name is on the Declaration of Independence. And as I said, William Livingston, who was the first governor of New Jersey, the direct ancestor of Congressman Kean, he signed the U.S. Constitution of I call it 1787, created in 1787, ratified in 1788, but became effective in 1789, when on April 30, 1789, the Robert R. Livingston, the Chancellor, and also an ancestor of Congressman Kean, administered the oath of office to our first president, George Washington. By the way, George Washington, I've done a video talking about the speeches of American presidents. George Washington actually gave the shortest the shortest inaugural speech ever, right? So on record, I've done a video talking about who gave the longest inaugural speech, and that's William Henry Harrison. He gave the longest inaugural speech. As of that time, he was the oldest to become American president, who was just 68. Of course, we have people who are octogenarians today, who are presidents, like the incumbent, number 45 and 47, President Donald Trump. He's 80 years old now. His predecessor, Joe Biden, was in his 80s as well. So, but of course, William Henry Harrison, having given that longest speech, it was a very good speech. I read it. I read all the speeches of American presidents until more recently, but I like the historical stuff. I think I read them all up until President Barack Obama. But it cost William Henry Harrison, because he gave his speech in the cold winter. Back then it was March 4 that presidents were sworn into office, and he said to have caught pneumonia, and he died 1 month after taking office, unfortunately. So the ancestry of Congressman Kean is august, right? Very prominent. And Congressman Kean, while being out, MIA for 142 days because, mental illness, severe depression. By the way, that depression is one, I've done a video talking about how mental illness can actually cause denial of admission into America, right? It has to be combined with being dangerous as a result of that mental illness. And severe depression is one of those ailments, right? It's one of those ailments that can cause you to be denied a green card, and denial of make you inadmissible to entering America, right? Severe depression, schizophrenia. So, and one of the reasons is because the immigration officials do not want immigrants to become a tax burden, right? A burden on taxpayers, because you can see Congressman Kean, he was out of office for almost 5 months in the hospital because of depression. However, Americans were paying his bill, right? He was being paid as a congressman in a six-figure position as congressman, even though he missed over 140 votes, right? Because the work of a congressman is to vote on bills, right? On laws, create laws for us. He missed over 140 votes in Congress. On average, the average congressman votes on about, between 100 and 150 bills a year. So he missed the majority, about 90% of his work, over 140 votes. So he missed over 90% of of his work, but he's getting paid. He's getting paid, and which is the humane thing to do, right? But this doesn't happen with minorities. And I'm going to now tell the story of my friend who was dehumanized. My friend was a very brilliant person, and I'm not going to mention the name of the school or mention my friend's name, but my friend, you know, earned was a very hard working person. It still is. And she was in university, one of the most prestigious universities, and comes from a good family, a humble family, a good person, very hardworking. And she earned her bachelor's, her MBA, and she was doing a dual degree, MBA and JD. She studied abroad, went to, elite schools. I'm not going to mention them for her privacy, but the most elite schools. So she was always in the library. That's how I knew her, studying in the library, right? And had the constant, permanent smile on her face, religious. And at some point, studying in school is very difficult. And sometimes, especially if you're in a city where your family is not present, you're all alone. And she used a coping mechanism, something that helps people cope is religion. And she's a devout Christian, and she was at the university chapel praying, kneeling, and unfortunately a priest took her to be a homeless person, right? A priest that you'd expect would empathize with, even if she were homeless and kneeling and being in a prayerful posture. The priest shouldn't have dehumanized her. The priest called the cops on her, didn't know who she was, that she's a student, or didn't care, right? Just because she was Nigerian, right? She was a black person, right? The priest, black people are discriminated against by white people, by everybody, by even black people, right? Black people, there's that victim mentality, that they tend to victimize people in their own status, right? So it's unfortunate, but so this priest calls the cops, and the cops, instead of treated her with humanity, the cops dragged her in cuffs to jail, dehumanized her, brutalized her, assaulted her, maced her, choked her, did all sorts of dehumanizing things to somebody who had paid hundreds of $1,000s, wasn't one of the most expensive schools in America, right? That school had actually once been the most expensive university in America. And it's called a school for the wealthy. There was a time the papers would disparage, the media would disparage the school as being the school of kings and the rich and all that, because it once had the most expensive tuition in America. But here was this person who paid all that money. She was where she had a right to be in. At least she's in a chapel, right? The school chapel, and a priest should treat people who come in, right, who look weary, who need comforting, with humanity. But unfortunately, this priest conspired to dehumanize this person. Because every time you call the cops on a black person, the cops are going to dehumanize that person, right? I've done videos talking about how this man impersonating himself as my relative, as my uncle, when he's not, right? I'm in my home, leasing is in my name. He's trespassing. I didn't even know. He calls cops, 40 cops come, dehumanize me, falsely imprison me. They had no arrest warrant, by the way. And then after dehumanizing me, they tortured me, removed me naked from my apartment, and then video recorded me violating voyeurism laws, placed me in handcuffs, right? All, by the way, what he was saying was, okay, that he thought I had a mental health crisis. I've never suffered a mental health crisis. By the way, I don't have a mental illness. I thank God. I'm not a psychopath that can't, empathize or feel pain. No, that's not the situation. But I control my narrative. I won't let somebody dehumanize me or call me out of my name. Again, I don't want to personalize it. I want to focus on somebody else. So, just to remind us, I'm not of the automaton and misanthrope generation, so I can humanize and empathize with others. So this person was arrested on her own campus in a chapel where she was seeking comfort for, mental health. She was praying. You don't have to go to a clinician or a psychiatrist or psychologist to receive treatment for mental health or to receive coping, right? Because again, coping, religion helps improve your psychological health, your mental health. Religion actually helps that. Studies have shown that. So she was in the right place. Instead, she was dehumanized and then forced into a position to experience depression and anxiety. Somebody who'd never been to jail, being dehumanized, being falsely accused, being mistreated, right? Being violated. You can imagine she was actually in the right place. She was a law student. She knew, the law. She knew her rights. But here she was being dehumanized. Now, America's racist cops, when a black person is telling them that they know their rights, they actually get more aggravated, right? They get more worked up, and then they want to dehumanize that black person, that they have no rights. So that's why I caution Nigerians not to be afraid of authority figures, right? The person behind the law, because they often don't actually know the law, and they want to weaponize the law against minorities, especially blacks, people of African descent. And this was the case with this person, right? And this, she was dehumanized, and so the police, of course, caused an infliction of severe emotional distress. That's something one can sue for, right? When you're abused, there's something in the tort law. It's called intentional infliction of emotional distress, right? You don't have to have a condition of mental illness or whatever, express that to prevail in a suit for intentional infliction of emotional distress. But I wanted to show the contrast, right, in the way people, minorities are treated, how, mental health is weaponized against black people because they're not given empathy. This person was in her school, in a place of worship, in a humble posture. She should have been treated humanely. She ended up being locked up in jail for several days. Her family didn't know where she was, right? Her family had handed over their child to the university, expecting that the university would treat her, would guarantee her safety. She was on campus. She wasn't at a nightclub, a bar, or anywhere else. She wasn't on the streets. She was on campus in a school chapel. Yet she was dehumanized right there. They called the cops to arrest her and dehumanize her and lock her up in a DC jail. DC jail is a terrible place, right? I was wrongfully detained in Montgomery County. Montgomery County is almost like a Shangri-La of jails, right? I talked about how I read over 100 books. Like, okay, cool. I'm just going to, when you guys get tired of your lies, of your defamation, I'm going to, of course, get out and sue you in the end. My family's going to sue you. Don't worry about that. But, it's a place that, jail's not good because of the, you don't want to associate with criminal elements, but you get to learn about other people. That if you're being wrongfully detained, you bet there are others who like you who are wrongfully detained, who are not supposed to be there, and you can learn their stories. And in fact, if people even make mistakes, they shouldn't be dehumanized and put with the criminally insane, these psychopathic elements, the serial killers. You shouldn't be mixed up with them, right? Because again, you're innocent until proven guilty. But hopefully the experience of Congressman Kean might be able to get Congress to move on laws to prevent the weaponization of mental health by law enforcement and the courts and institutions against black men and people of African descent, which is what's going on today, right? Mental health is being weaponized against blacks. It's used in there's a parallel system in which there's a dichotomy in the way mental health issues are applied to people based on race. For whites, you see they are treated with humanity. They empathized with, but for blacks, it's used to criminalize and make posture black people as boogeymen, as a boogeyman, and dangerous, to be locked up, incarcerated, placed in jail, right? That they're dangerous, place them in jail. Don't let people with mental illness into America. So hopefully, the experience of Congressman Kean might be able to steer Congress into being realistic, creating common sense and empathetic, humane laws that are humane towards Black Americans, and stop the weaponization of mental health against Black Americans. The state of Maryland has tried to blackmail me, so they used this pretext of mental health to to defame me, to damage my reputation, because I hold a top secret clearance, and prevent me from being able to work for almost 4 years. They created the police officers who had no arrest warrants. There was no probable cause for anything. I was in my home, who tortured me in my home, who filed false charges against me, who suborned perjury, now claimed they were my victim. When even the body cam, I've posted it online, shows that these people are delusional liars, like DeMarcus Coleman. He is clearly delusional, right? The body cam shows them torturing me, tasering me. I didn't touch any one of them. I didn't assault any one of them. But the state of Maryland has filed these false charges and tried to blackmail me, saying, well, if I say I have a mental illness, they'll dismiss the charges and let me go back to work. But if I don't, because it's going to lead to the prosecution of these cops. So the crooked state attorney, John McCarthy, filed false charges, right, to protect and cover up police misconduct. And if it happens to me, if it's happening to me, a law-abiding American citizen working in the federal government, I know, holding a top secret clearance, I know it's happening to others. In fact, I saw people that in jail while I was wrongfully detained. I haven't had a trial, by the way, and I've been detained for 450 days. My friend was detained for 5 days. That was bad enough. But you can imagine 450 days in jail with criminal elements, detained, and under house arrest for 1 year. The judge openly said he wanted me to lose my job, using it as blackmail and to extort, all violations of RICO. So it's unfortunate, but like I said, hopefully the Congressman Kean is able to draw attention and stop weaponizing mental health to create criminals of Black people, and seek the prosecution, hold government officials who weaponize mental health against Black people, hold them accountable. My name is Olurotimi Osha, and this is the last. Hopefully, this is the last of the discussions I'm having concerning mental health in the Mental Health Awareness Month. Those who struggle with mental illness shouldn't feel ashamed, but they should be able to seek treatment with a psychiatrist or psychologist. I'm not a psychiatrist or psychologist, and I'm not, I don't struggle with a mental illness, but I'm a human being. I'm humane. I do understand pain. I do understand the need to seek empathy. Of course, the state of Maryland created conditions that can actually cause a severe mental illness, right? It could cause depression. It can cause, but fortunately, I'm a Christian, and I realize that I have a tough constitution, and I haven't suffered depression, even though the state of Maryland blackmailed me and blackballed me for over almost 4 years. Of course, and the Navy, my employer, because I had reported the misconduct and fraud of my employers in the Department of Defense and Department of the Navy. And of course, they engaged in a false flag operation that swatted me. All these things are criminal. I've done videos discussing this. And while I was detained, 4 people committed suicide. They were still having it was pre-trial detention. So I was in pre-trial detention. So they hold people before your trial because if they think you're dangerous, you pose a public safety threat, which I was defamed as posing. I'm no longer on GPS. I'm free to travel even out of the country, but I'm waiting for the case to be cleared. The state of Maryland continues to weaponize these false charges and malicious prosecution, which are illegal, right, against me. But while I was being detained between December 2024 and February 2025, at least 4 people committed suicide in jail while I was there. My name is Oluro Timeosha, and I'll keep you posted. Thank you.